Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. The afternoon sun was doing that lazy golden hour thing it does in late May painting. Long shadows across my lawn. I was out front, pretending to fuss over the Elis, but mostly just enjoying the quiet warmth, the smell of cut grass hanging in the air. It had been a long week, one of those where the silence in the house felt heavier than usual. My neighbor Martha usually provided a bit of cheerful chatter over the fence, but she'd been gone for a few days visiting her sister upstate. That's why I was surprised to see movement next door. Not Martha, though it was her son Leo. I didn't know Leo well. He lived out of state somewhere busy and important sounding and visited his mom maybe twice a year. He was young, probably closer to my own kid's age than mine. Maybe early 30s. Tall, lean with that kind of serious, thoughtful look about him. Dark hair that always seemed a bit windswept. He'd always been perfectly polite. A wave, a quick hello if we crossed paths while he was taking out the trash or getting his mom's mail. But that was it. We certainly weren't friends. He was wrestling with one of those big awkward recycling bins, the lid flapping open. He glanced up, saw me watching, and gave a small, slightly strained smile. He offered a friendly wave back, turning my attention pointedly back to a particularly stubborn weed near the rose bushes. I figured that was the extent of our interaction. Usually was then I heard the crunch of footsteps on the gravel strip between our driveways. I looked up again, shielding my eyes from the sun. Leo was walking towards me, wiping his hands on his jeans. He stopped a few feet away, leaning casually against the low picket fence that separated our yards. "Hi, Helen," he said. His voice was deeper, smoother than I'd expected. Not like the rushed hells I was used to. "Low hi," I replied. "Pulling off my gardening gloves, didn't expect to see you. Is your mom back already?" "No, not till tomorrow night," he explained, adjust. "Came down a bit early. Had some time off. Figured I'd get the house aired out, maybe tackle a few chores for her before she got home." He gestured vaguely towards Martha's house. The recycling bin seemed like a good place to start. "That's thoughtful of you," I said, meaning it. Martha adored him. You could tell always, talked about how busy he was, but how he always made time. She'll appreciate that. He nodded, his eyes scanning my garden for a moment. They were a surprisingly warm shade of brown, observant. "Your flowers always look amazing. Mom's always trying to catch up," I laughed. Softly. "Martha has the sunnier side of the street mind, take a bit more coaxing." We stood there for a moment. The comfortable silence punctuated by the distant buzz of a lawnmower somewhere down on the block. It felt slightly awkward. This extended conversation, we'd never talked for more than 30 seconds before. Then he shifted, his weight looking directly at me again. "Actually, Helen," he began, and there was a slight hesitation in his voice that Madame, look closer. I was just about to make some coffee. Realized I bought way too many beans at that place downtown. Would you like to join me for a cup?" I blinked. Coffee with Martha's son. My mind did a quick scramble. Why was he just being neighborly? Because his mom was away, maybe he was bored, or maybe he felt obligated somehow. It seemed odd and prompted. We had virtually nothing in common, separated by a good 20 years and completely different lives. A little ripple of unease, or maybe just surprise, went through me. "Oh," I said, stalling slightly. "Coffee? That's nice of you, Leo." I glanced towards his mom's house, then back at him. He wasn't fidgeting or looking away. His gaze was steady, open. There was no hidden agenda I could detect. Just a simple, direct invitation. No pressure. "Of course." Headed quickly, perhaps sensing my hesitation. "Just thought I'd ask. Making a whole pot just for myself. Feels a bit excessive." He gave another small smile. This one a little more relaxed, and maybe it was the way the sunlight caught the flecks of gold in his eyes, or the unexpectedness of the offer, or just the fact that the silence in my own house suddenly seemed less appealing than the prospect of conversation, even slightly awkward. Conversation. Maybe I was just curious. What harm could a cup of coffee do? It was just coffee with the neighbor's son, who happened to be home early. You know what I said, making a sudden decision, pulling myself up straighter. That sounds lovely. Give me 5 minutes to wash up. His smile widened, reaching his eyes. This time. Great. Yeah, take your time. I'll just get it brewing. Front door's unlocked when you're ready. He turned and headed back towards Martha's porch, jogging lightly up the steps. I watched him go, a strange mix of apprehension and intrigue bubbling up inside. Me, what was I doing? This was probably nothing. Just a polite gesture, but a little voice, one I hadn't heard from in a while, whispered that. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't nothing at all. I took a deep breath, the scent of roses and impending rain filling my lungs, and headed inside, my heart beating just a little faster than usual. This was definitely unexpected. Walking across the lawn that separated my house from Martha's felt strangely significant, like crossing more than just a patch of grass. The 5 minutes I'd asked for stretched closer to 10, as I changed out of my gardening clothes, ran a brush through my hair, and applied a touch of lipstick, something I rarely bothered with unless I was actually going somewhere. Why the effort, I asked myself sternly in the bathroom mirror. It's just coffee. But the reflection showed a hint of color in my cheeks that hadn't been there before. Martha's front door was indeed unlocked. I pushed it open tentatively, calling out, "Leo, it's Helen in the kitchen." His voice called, back followed by the clatter of ceramic mugs. Martha's kitchen was exactly as I remembered it. Cozy, slightly cluttered in a homey way, with cheerful yellow walls and rooster-themed everything. The air was thick with the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Leo was standing by the counter, pouring dark liquid into 2 sturdy-looking mugs. He'd taken off his light jacket, and the rolled-up sleeves of his shirt showed surprisingly strong forearms. He looked up as I entered, gesturing towards the small, round table tucked into the breakfast nook. "Have a seat," he said. "Milk, sugar?" "Just a splash of milk, please," I replied, sliding into one of the cushioned chairs. The nook overlooked Martha's backyard, which, unlike mine, was bathed in the full glory of the afternoon sun. Her bird feeders were busy with activity. He brought the mugs over, placing one in front of me before sitting opposite. Up close, I could see the faint lines around his eyes, suggesting he smiled more often than his default serious expression lay on. He wasn't boyish despite being younger than me. There was a certain maturity, a self-possession about him. "Thanks again for this," I said, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "It smells wonderful." "My one essential vice," he chuckled. "Good coffee. Mom usually just has the instant stuff, bless her heart." We started talking easily at first, about his trip down the traffic, his mom's upcoming return. He asked about my kids, remembering their names from brief mentions Martha must have made over the years. I told him about Sarah finishing her master's degree, and Michael getting settled into his new job across the country. It felt normal, neighbory, but then the conversation shifted. He asked about my garden, not just polite questions, but specific ones, about companion planting and dealing with aphids, showing a surprising knowledge. Turns out he'd done some volunteer work at a community garden project in his city. We talked about that for a while, about the satisfaction of growing things, the connection to the earth. It was unexpected common ground. He steered the conversation, gently asking thoughtful questions, not prying, just interested. He asked about my work. I do freelance bookkeeping from home. Not exactly thrilling stuff, but he listened intently, asking about the challenges, the flexibility. He talked a bit about his own job, something complex, involving data analysis for an environmental nonprofit. He spoke about it with passion making. It sounded far more engaging than I would have imagined. The initial awkwardness I'd felt completely melted away, replaced by a surprising ease. Talking to him felt comfortable, natural. He had a way of listening, really listening, that made me feel heard. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he leaned forward slightly, the focused look in his eyes, the perceptive follow-up, questions I found myself opening up more than I intended, talking about how quiet the house had gotten since the kids left, how my work sometimes felt isolating things I usually kept tucked away. He didn't offer platitudes or easy answers, he just nodded, acknowledging it. "Yeah, transitions are tough," he said, quietly. "Big like shifts always leave a vacuum for a while, don't they?" He spoke about his own experience moving to a new city. A few years back, the loneliness he'd felt before finding his footing. It wasn't a comparison, just a shared understanding. The sunlight slanted lower through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the table. We were on our second cup of coffee, though neither of us seemed to be paying much attention to drinking it anymore. The air felt different now, charged with something quiet and intense. It wasn't flirtatious, not in the way I understood. It was deeper than that, a connection forming thread by invisible thread in the cozy quiet of his mother's kitchen. I realized I hadn't felt this genuinely engaged in a conversation this scene in a very long time. Not since Robert, well, not for years. It was unsettling and exhilarating, all at once. I looked at Leo, really looked at him, seeing past the neighbor's son label. I saw a kind, intelligent man with a depth that surprised me, and the way he was looking back at me. It wasn't the polite disinterest of a younger man making conversation with an older neighbor. It was open, curious, and undeniably warm. The unexpectedness of it all was dizzying. This casual coffee invitation had turned into something else entirely, something quiet and profound that was unfolding between us right there at Martha's kitchen table. The coffee grew cold in our mugs. Outside, the birdsong started to fade as dusk began to creep into the corners of the sky. We were still talking, the conversation weaving through different topics, books we'd read, places we'd traveled, even philosophies on life. It was astonishing how much common ground we found, how easily we understood each other's perspectives even when they differed. There was a spark there, an intellectual curiosity matched with an emotional resonance that caught me completely off guard. Leo mentioned a documentary he'd recently watched about urban redevelopment and its impact on community ties. It was a subject I felt surprisingly passionate about, having seen changes in our own town over the years. We talked for ages about it, debating points, sharing observations. He didn't patronize me or dismiss my opinions. He engaged, challenged, and listened. It felt like a conversation between equals, contemporaries, almost, despite the years between us. At some point, he got up to rinse the mugs I offered to help, but he waved me off gently. "Stay put. You're the guest." I watched him move around his mother's familiar kitchen with an easy grace. He seemed comfortable here, yet also slightly separate, a visitor, inhabiting a space temporarily. When he sat back down, he didn't immediately pick up the conversational thread. He just looked at me for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You know, Helen," he said slowly, his voice softer now. "My mom talks about you sometimes, says you're one of the kindest people she knows." I felt a blush creep up my neck. "Oh, Martha's just biased." I deflected, slightly flustered. "We look out for each other. That's all." Maybe he conceded, a small smile playing on his lips. "But she also says, you seem a little lonely sometimes since your husband passed and the kids moved out." His directness took my breath away for a second. It wasn't rude, just frank, honest. It hung in the air between us. Undeniable. I couldn't meet his gaze immediately, looking down at my hands clasped on Thedable. "Well," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's an adjustment. The quiet takes some getting used to, I can only imagine," he said softly. There was real empathy in his voice. He reached across the small table, then not grabbing my hand but just lightly touching my forearm with his fingertips. It wasn't a romantic gesture, not exactly, but it was incredibly intimate. A simple acknowledgement, a point of contact that sent a surprising jolt through me. Warm and electric, I looked up, meeting his eyes. They were full of understanding. No pity, just connection. It's not easy. I admitted, the words coming out barely above a whisper. Sometimes it feels like that chapter of, my life is completely closed and I haven't quite figured out how to start the next one. He held my gaze, his fingers still resting lightly on my arm. Maybe chapters don't close, he suggested. Maybe they just blend into the next one. New characters come in. The plot takes unexpected turns. His words resonated deeply, unexpected turns like this afternoon. Like sitting here, sharing vulnerabilities with my neighbor's son, feeling more understood than I had in years. The air crackled with unspoken thoughts, with the intensity of this sudden, profound connection. It was more than just shared interests or a good conversation. It felt like stumbling upon a hidden clearing in a dense forest, a place of quiet understanding and mutual recognition. He eventually drew his hand back, but the warmth lingered on my skin. The intimacy didn't dissipate. It settled between us, comfortable and real. We talked a little more, but the energy had shifted. It was quieter, more reflective. He shared a little about a past relationship that had ended badly, not in detail, but enough for me to understand the echoes of hurt he still carried. It made him seem less like just Martha's son and more like a person with his own history, his own scars. The respect between us was palpable. There was no game playing, no pretense. Just two people connecting on a surprisingly deep level, despite the circumstances. Despite the age difference. It was the unexpectedness of it, the sheer authenticity of the moment, that made it so powerful. This wasn't just coffee. It was a discovery, a quiet revelation unfolding in the fading light, and I knew somehow that this afternoon would stay with me for a very long time. As the streetlights flickered on outside, casting pale yellow squares onto the kitchen floor, a sense of time returning seeped into our quiet bubble. Leo glanced at the clock, on the microwave. "Wow, look at the time," he murmured. I didn't realize it had gotten so late. Neither did I admitted, feeling a pang of something akin to disappointment, that the afternoon was ending. The conversation just flowed. It really did. He agreed, meeting my eyes again. There was that same warmth, that same quiet intensity. "Helen, thank you. Seriously, for the company, for the talk." It was, had trailed off, searching for the right word. Really nice, much nicer than tackling those recycling bins alone. I smiled, a genuine smile that reached my highness. The pleasure was all mine, Leo. It was unexpected but lovely. We stood up simultaneously. The small kitchen suddenly felt very close. There was a moment of slight awkwardness, the kind that happens when an unusually intimate encounter draws Toa close and the real world intrudes. How do you say goodbye after something like that? He walked me to the door, flipping on the porch light against the deepening twilight. Standing on the top step, I turned back to him. "Well, thanks again for the coffee," I said, my voice sounding a little too formal to my own ears. "Anytime," he replied softly. He hesitated for a second, then reached out. Not to touch my arm this time, but just letting his hand hover near my shoulder. For a moment, a gesture of warmth that didn't quite make contact but felt just as significant. "Drive safe." "Oh, wait," he chuckled a little, embarrassed. "You're just walking across the lawn," I laughed too, the sound easing, the slight tension. "Yes, I think I can manage the perilous journey back. Get home safe anyway," he said, his smile lingering. His eyes held mine for a beat longer. The necessary, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. an acknowledgement of the connection we'd found, the unexpected depth of the afternoon. Then I turned and walked down the steps across the darkening grass towards my own quiet house. I didn't look back, but I could feel his gaze on me until I reached my own porch. Inside, he leaned against the closed door for a moment, breathing deeply. The house wasn't just as I'd left it, but it felt different somehow. Less empty. The encounter with Leo hadn't been earth-shattering in a dramatic way. There were no declarations, no grand gestures. It was subtle quiet, yet profoundly moving. It was the simple act of being seen, truly seen by another person. It was the surprise of finding a connection in the most unexpected of places with the most unexpected of people. Sitting later with a cup of tea watching the late news without really registering, I reflected on the afternoon. I hadn't felt that spark of connection, that sense of being mentally and emotionally aligned with someone in such a long time. It wasn't about age or circumstance or what anyone else might think. It was about a moment of genuine human interaction that had somehow cracked open a window in a room I hadn't even realized was growing stuffy. It reminded me that life could still hold surprises, that connections could bloom in unlikely soil. It didn't necessarily mean anything had to happen next. The beauty was in the experience itself, the conversation, the understanding, the mutual respect. Leo had given me a gift, perhaps without even realizing it. He'd reminded me that I was still capable of deep connection. That part of me wasn't closed off forever. A sense of quiet gratitude washed over me. Gratitude for Leo's spontaneous invitation, for his openness, for the respectful way he had shared his time and thoughts. It was a reminder that emotional intimacy can be found in many forms, often when you least expect it. As I finally headed up to bed, the house still felt quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet. Now it felt less like an absence and more like a space filled with gentle possibility, a quiet hum of having been truly seen. The simple cup of coffee had turned into a moment of personal discovery, a subtle shift in my own inner landscape, leaving me with a quiet sense of hope and a warmth that lingered long after the coffee itself had gone old.